I'll just send a screenshot of this.
All right, my setup is good. I think I'm just gonna keep it like this.
Okay.
Right. I really don't have an agenda. I think the weekend was jam packed with stuff and can go with any directions.
Okay.
Don't know
Let
if you
me
have.
screenshot real quick, and
Mhm.
then I can post a tweet.
Sweet.
All right. And I'll send tweet. LTA. What the heck? Where's the emote? All right. Should be good.
Awesome.
I'm gonna go ahead and start the stream then. Cool. We are live.
Welcome to a new episode of Be a Fan. It's a crossover. You have a name for your show? Just
I don't really have a show right now that's consistent. So the
we're
Doc
getting.
Respawn show, it's always
Yeah,
different.
we've been talking about this collab for a while. I'm sure we'll make it happen at some point because you and I, Jordan, we've been fans of both League and Valorant, and so we're trying to marry the both of them. But welcome everyone. For first timers, I know there's not many, but certainly if there are any first timers, I don't think this man needs an introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. This is Dr. Jordan Sai, also known as Doc Respawn. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's been a jam-packed weekend, and for you, it's been busy since the last time I had you on the pod. So I really want to catch up, talk a little bit about the things that you are working on behind the scenes. But let's dive in. This weekend was crazy. I mean, I don't know how much of the games you got to watch. I know Bangkok time is really rough especially for
I
you.
I don't watch them live
Mm,
usually. Well, okay. I watch one series live, but it's because I wake up at 5 in the morning, so I can usually catch either game 2 or 3 of the second series.
yeah.
But yeah, I usually watch so my girlfriend's really into Valorant too, so we'll usually watch the first series like later on, just after the fact.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've been trying to keep up to date with it. Obviously, really sad to see Sentinels knocked out, but not completely unexpected. I think I was more surprised by who they lost to than the fact that they lost.
Yeah,
Put it that way.
absolutely. We'll
Yeah.
definitely dive into that to talk about. It's been a little bit kinder from us East Coaster because when I wake up, the second game is just starting, but definitely I'm missing the first game. So do you dodge spoilers until you watch the first game? You watch the VODs?
Uh, Usually not really.
Mhm.
I mean, it's impossible because if I go on Twitter in the morning, I'm gonna kind of see who won.
Yeah.
But to me, it doesn't really matter. Like
Mhm.
I enjoy sometimes when I can watch live because I don't know who's going to win. But what I'm looking at usually when I rewatch VODs and all that is mostly just like how our team's playing. Like
Mhm.
that's actually what I care about.
Okay.
Yeah, it's nice to see if your team won or lost, but it doesn't really change the outcome regardless. So to me, it's like the surprise in a time zone like that doesn't really matter. Obviously, I prefer if I can to watch live, but
Mhm.
it's not realistic with an international esport.
I'm sure, but so I'm sensing that you are watching with more of an analytical eye, see what happens, kind of
Yeah,
break down. How are they,
yeah,
setting up? How are the utils being used? We'll dive into that in just Valorant.
yeah.
It started this weekend, and it just right. Got that right. Right? It started this weekend. Thursday.
Which
The VCT Masters.
no, I think it started last week.
Was it last week? Oh man, time flies by so quickly.
Yeah,
Because I, you know,
been a
lovely
lot of
how
games.
yeah. G2 is our team. I mean, my team for sure, and you're jumping in the bandwagon. I'm glad
I
you're here.
mean, I've always said I don't have a fandom.
Hmm.
Like I can be a fan. I'm a fan of NA, right? So I really this is actually what I try to explain to a lot of people. I'm not a fan of a team. I'm a fan of the region,
Yeah.
and it's the same in LTA, right?
Hmm.
As long as it's not even like, oh, I want to root for the best team in North America. I want all the teams in North America to do well. So I'm always supportive of teams that I think they're approaching it the right way and they're
Mhm.
actually building up systems that are going to allow them to continue to improve. So that's my interest. And
Yeah.
I think G2 this year has been that for me. Like they've really done it the right way. They built it from the ground up. They're obviously a tier 2 team that jumped in. I'm a big fan of Josh RT,
Yeah.
like coach.
The
So
coach. Mhm.
yeah, I think they made really good roster moves, and I am happy to support them. I hope they do well, and they're still in it. So
Yeah, and absolutely, we want both LTA and VCT Americas to be the forerunners, and we continue to root for them regardless of who they are. I just jumped on G2 since last split because I saw this team more as an underdog that came in. They had to go against giants like Leviathan. They had to go against Sentinels, and they just were tenacious and they performed well internationally too. But this year, they really took it to an extra level when the addition of Jagamu.
mhm.
Uh, so last week was awesome to watch. Them just you know they beat their team. They beat the team. I forgot who they. Was it Trace? I think it was.
um, yeah. They beat Trace, and they just beat TL.
Mhm. And that coming into this weekend, right? They were faced up against EDG. I was like nervous. That game I was
Yeah.
really yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that I'm not surprised they lost to EDG. EDG is again defending champions. They look on form again.
Hmm.
They kind of look unstoppable, and I think that thematically they match up really well against G2. G2 tends to be very systematic. They like to play the game slow. They like to talk through rounds mid round, right? Like so, Valent's one of the best IGLs in the game. He needs time to set up the play. They like to play controlled Valorant, right?
Hmm.
EDG is just they're phenomenal. They're across the board. Every single player is a shooter,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the lowest ACS player is probably nobody or Simon. It's probably Simon.
Simon.
But when
Yeah.
you look at the amount of kills that Simon gets at the end of the round and how many rounds he clutches, it's unreal. Like that whole team is built so well. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I don't think anyone can say that they're not the best team in the world currently, given
Hmm.
that they're the defending champs and they look like they're on form. They're shooting really, really well. So, yeah, it's really tough to see G2 lose to them. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, if there was any team that was going to beat them, I think it'd be EDG. And if there's any time to lose, I think that was the round to lose it in. Because now G2 is going to come in. They obviously figured something out. They kind of stomped by TL, right?
Hmm.
So they're
Yeah.
going into this match against Vitality, hopefully in a good state of mind. I saw an interview with Valen after. He's like, "No, our confidence is totally fine." He's like,
It's good.
"We kind of learned a lot,
Hmm.
which is what I love hearing. That's why I really like this team, and I really like the way that coaching staff has constructed the roster. I love the mentality that they have. It's always like, how can we continue to improve? Not we lost. That sucks.
And that is something that when you talked about that, it's really on display this week when G2 beat Team Liquid. They kind of slow played the first couple of rounds, and they lose.
Mhm.
That doesn't matter to them. They just come back, and once they're like on form, they completely stomp TL, which it's good to see. And for them to take, I guess the EDG the first game all that was overtime after overtime. That was like the longest drawn out. I think that helped
Yeah.
them win that one. But after that, oh man, Abyss they tried, came close. Bind completely got stomped on, and all
Wait, did they
credit.
play Abyss?
Yeah, second map was Abyss in the game against G2 against EDG. I'm thinking of that
It was
series.
Abyss? Oh, I thought they banned Abyss. I
Uh,
thought it was Pearl and then maybe it was because they lost on Fracture, right?
they
Um
lost. Oh, was it Fracture? I
no, I think
know it
they
was.
they no, they lost Haven. I think EDG banned Abyss.
Oh, they might have been Abyss. I know it was a
Yeah, because
map that they that. What?
Abyss is like G2's best map.
Hmm.
So if EDG did any sort of scouting, they were gonna ban Abyss. But Fracture is also a really tough map for G2 because I think Fracture specifically plays to all of EDG's strengths. I think from now on, no team should let Fracture through against EDG.
Yeah.
They just can't
They.
because that team is too good on it. It,
Right.
it just plays into everything. They can split 2-3. They can 5-man. They can rotate. Like they're gonna win every single gunfight they go into. It's incredible what Fracture allows teams that are really good at improvising do. Like that's why EG back in the day, that was like their best map last year. Um, Fracture is just a map that allows for a lot of variability and versatility in IGLing, and I think it really favors teams that can all shoot. If you have one or two star players, you're not going to do well on Fracture.
Huh. That makes sense. I suck at Fracture.
Yeah, I at low elo, Fracture's horrible.
It's
It's
like
the worst map. I hate playing Fracture because it requires a very high level of execution and it requires a very high level of organization,
you need
both of
coordination.
which do not exist. Like, so, yeah,
Uh,
I think it's really, really hard. I mean, again, I'm not an analyst. I'm just looking at it from the perspective, like, what are the relative strengths of these teams? And I think EDG, it's just any map where you can freestyle really, really effectively, they're going to do really well on.
mm,
Whereas if you look at G2's best maps, it's like Abyss is a sort of one-dimensional map. That's actually been the biggest complaint about it. It's very much you decide where the weak spot is, you hit that site, you set it, you play for post plant. G2's post plants are some of the best in the game, right?
mm.
Like if they get the site and they have 5 alive, it is impossible to crack them. But for EG or for EDG, it's like they don't have to play any map any specific way. They just kind of like freestyle it. But I mean, obviously they have set protocols. They have very set ways they play
Mm.
it. It just feels very, very hard for teams to counter strat because there's so much going on.
It's doesn't matter too if you take out Kang Kang, someone else will step up for that team, and
Th- I mean,
that's
I
what
think the
happens.
highest fragging player on EDG right now is Chichu.
Chichu, yep, and
He's
saw him on
incredible. Like
display.
he's getting like three kills around to open the round every single game. It's crazy.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really hard to see any weakness on that team right now.
Oh man, and they play so quickly.
Yeah.
For those who haven't followed Valorant for a long time, just like myself, if you haven't looked into it, look into EDG's story. How before they even became champions, it took them a long time to get Valorant into China, and for Kang Kang to go through back channels just to get to play Valorant. But man, that's an incredible story to watch, and it's one of the things that made draw us to esports. Coming back here, they should be the favorite. They continue to look great, and then G2 bounce back. Yeah, I already mentioned against Team Liquid, the same team that beat Sentinel. Now, like you mentioned, it was quite surprising for Sentinel's performance, and
Yeah.
I'm curious what you've heard, what you've seen so far.
I don't have any insider information, but I feel like Sentinels underperformed. I definitely would have had them favored against TL, but Sentinels kind of struggles with a few things. And one, I think they're still trying to figure out. It's fine actually because this is very early in the season. They have new players coming in. They have a very veteran leadership gone, right? So in tens,
Mm-hmm.
tens leaving is such a big deal for that team. Not because he was the best shooter or the most brilliant like IGL, any of the right. He's not even the IGL, but he brings a veteran presence, which I think helps a lot of the younger players gel, and he brings a very cohesive approach to the game that now they're lacking.
Mm.
So I think they'll be fine. You know, the fact that they even made it to kickoff to made it
True.
to Bangkok is great. A lot of the other teams that plugged in new players didn't do so well. So I think they'll be able to gel over the rest of the season. The things I want to see is narrate. He's fragging. He's got such high highs, but from what I went to finals when Sentinels played against G2, and the one thing I noticed is narrate gets into his own head.
Mm.
Like I don't know if they have a sports psych on staff or what, but he looked tilted, and a couple of times you had to see Zelsis turn to him like, "Hey, calm down, man. Like, take a breath." He was kind of beating himself up every time he whiffed a shot, and then in between games he was fine, right? He was able to
Mm.
go backstage, recovered. They almost brought it to game. They brought it to game 5 actually. Right?
Game three,
No,
they were the
almost game
best
3.
threes. Yeah.
So the one that they won was the one after he lost it. Like he was freaking out on stage. He was like kind of like actually like yelling at himself.
Mm.
And I think they calmed him down. They came back. He fragged out. He was top frag actually in the map that they lost in Haven. And so he can definitely do it. But this is sort of like until he fixes that part, it's going to be really hard for them to get to the next level of actually truly competing for top 2, top 3 placement in an international stage.
Yeah.
Um, I think the mentality needs to be figured out. And that's actually what I noticed after they lost. A lot of the players were tweeting stuff like, "We are so disappointed. We're so sorry. Like, like we
Mm.
underperformed." When I hear stuff like that, it's mostly probably a mental issue that in my opinion, that they
Mm.
have to address. Like these are all very, very skilled players when they're on.
Yeah, I think you're close to being on the right track because I do watch Tenz's co-stream, and he
Mhm.
mentioned some of the same elements that you've said. The team just needs to find a way to calm in between in the game, in the middle of the game, and find it
Yeah.
quickly. And yeah, it's been a big change. They lost Saucy. How do you pronounce
Dawson,
that?
yeah.
Saucy too, and that is another big piece. But this team
Yeah.
will be fine. Like you said, they made it to
I
internationals.
yeah. I really like the pickup of Bang. Bang's been playing really, really
Oh man.
well. Um, but I think it's mostly they need Narrate to just not do too much, but just chill, and they'll be fine, right?
Mhm.
They're still figuring out their individual play too. Zekin's been having a pretty good year. I don't think
Absolutely.
we've seen the same highs yet, but he's been playing pretty well. Zelsis has been playing phenomenal. I think
Hmm.
that he was the most disappointed because he hard carried them
Hmm.
the series before, and then in the loss, I guess he felt like he underperformed. So, it is what it is. I think they'll learn a lot from this. This is the first international, well, not first international actually for any of them because Narrate was on
Which team was he on?
Oi
I just pulled him up.
or K Corp, right?
K Corp. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was.
So he played international too, and same thing. He did really well in the beginning of the year, and then K Corp kind of just flamed out the rest of the year. So I'm hoping this is not a repeat like
Mhm.
mental thing for him, like where he chokes in big situations, because they had the same issue. They lost in finals.
Mm.
They went to Madrid. They did okay, and then they got knocked out. And I wonder if that's sort of like in his head, right? So
Mhm.
this is something that happens to players in any sport.
Mhm.
When you have the same historical loss pattern, it starts to get into your head
Right.
that maybe this is my fate, and that's something they have to break now.
Mhm. I
They
think
they
it.
have to
Yeah. Go
erase
ahead.
it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, no.
I think that's where you mentioned you don't know if they have a sports psychologist. This is where the psychologist can be helpful, even if a
Yeah,
mental health specialist, because it's hard when you start getting patterns and you start recognizing or like start making connections when there shouldn't be, or you can break out of it. And he's young; he's only 22, so the team has to come together. And for any team, Sentinels was one that I think last year really showed that bounce back capability. So I'm gonna put
yeah,
the faith in Kaplan, the coach.
yeah. I think their trajectory was really weird last year because they came back and they got much worse, and then they salvaged it at the end,
Hmm.
and then they in champs didn't look good, but then they beat Gen G.
Yeah,
And it was like,
weirdest thing.
I actually don't know where this team should be. Like, they're
They got
the thing with
highs.
Sentinels, they're too inconsistent. I think
Mm,
that's the one thing they have to lock in. That's the thing that G2 does the best is they're usually very, very consistent. I think that loss to EDG was the worst loss I've ever seen G2 have.
mm. Yeah,
Like it was
they
bad.
could not figure it out.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
right.
But again, it's just I think they just got outshot.
Hmm.
Like sometimes EDG was in horrible positions and they would shoot three of them with classics, and it was like, what? I don't even know what you do against that. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Right. Ah,
Like you
it's
played it
painful.
correctly, and they just happened to be
Hmm.
perfect aim that round. Who knows? There's not much you can do about that kind of stuff. You just
Mm,
have to hope you catch them on a not so good day,
yeah.
and you just have to play your best, right?
Mm,
That's the whole thing with esports at this level, which is actually the scary thing because, like you said, China hasn't been a professional league for very long yet,
hmm.
and they already have a world championship team. They already look like it wasn't a fluke.
Hmm.
They deserve to be there.
Yeah.
It's very, very scary.
Yeah.
On the upside, it looks like they are the best team in China by a whole
A
division because
huge margin.
right under them, Trace, who is arguably the other best team that everyone was very hyped for, didn't look good at all. Like they looked okay, but I'm actually more nervous for the Korean teams like DRX, T1. DRX is out now, but T1, DRX, obviously Genji didn't even make it, but they are so good like
Hmm.
to not have made it. And they lost in overtime to T1. So that shows you how close the disparity is in Korea. I think arguably the top 4 Korean teams might just be better than anyone else's top 4
Mm.
at this point.
Should be, and this is a great segue because this is one of the discussions we're having. Is the East closing in where, you know, typically? Well, I can't say that because I haven't watched this far. I know Genji, PRX, were always going to be like huge favorites or
Mhm.
perform well internationally, and they finally got their first was it Masters or Champs for Gen G last year, right?
Yeah, it was a Masters.
It was a
Yeah.
Masters, and so traditionally it's been Americas or EMEA,
EMEA. Yeah.
and so the gap you're seeing it closing.
I wouldn't even say it's closing. I think Korea's above us
Mm,
as a region right now. I think Korea is the best region in the world right now.
mm,
Uh, China is only good because EDG is that dominant,
mm-hmm.
and
It's
below that, it's a whole tier down. So I would say it's like EDG, like the Pacific's region, because
mm-hmm.
their top four is so strong, and then it's Americas, and then right under us is going to be EMEA.
Yeah.
And I know everyone's gonna give me flack about that because Sentinels lost to TL, but TL literally overperformed and Sentinels underperformed.
Yeah.
If you take the top four from Americas, I would put them against the top four in
Oh,
EMEA any day.
yep.
Like Heretics looks like they've fallen off a bit.
I know.
They look really bad. Fnatic looks completely lost. I would have taken Leviathan over them. I would have taken apparently MIBR somehow is actually good now. NRG I think will be very good.
Okay.
EG actually underperformed too. I would take EG over almost any team in EMEA. They lost to to G2.
Mm.
Like that team is so good with Leaf and I mean with Ye on there now. Like that squad's actually very very good. So it's really hard to say that Americas is under EMEA as a region.
Mm-hmm.
I do think Vitality look incredible, and they have to be respected, and they took out some very good teams to get to where they are. So, to segue a little bit into the brackets, I am so hyped for the semifinals. This matchup is the picture perfect top four alignment that I wanted to see. Right, we got like Vitality versus G2, and then we got DRX. I mean, we got T1 versus uh
EDG. Yeah.
EDG.
Yeah.
So many G's. I keep
I know. It's
but yeah,
EDG. Yeah.
it is the most hyped top four I
Mhm.
think that we could have gotten. It's so funny because everyone's there's a little bit more segue. Everyone's been flaming the LTA format. At simultaneously, the VCT format has been incredible. This has been such a good tournament, actually,
Mhm.
for Bangkok.
Yeah.
Like,
It goes just as quickly too. It's been 2 weekends and they're
yeah,
already like down here and
that's what I
switch.
mean.
Same thing in
How
LTA.
how can they not run the exact same format for League? It makes no sense. It's the exact same timeline.
Uh,
The games take just as long, if not shorter. It makes no sense.
you know what? This is a marketing issue for me on one hand, and also Riot.
They,
It's
they
Riot.
managed to fit a best of 3 into best of 5s, and they have double elim. How could they not do that for LTA?
I don't know. I don't
I
know.
it makes no sense, man.
Uh,
You could run 2 sets of games each day. It drives me crazy. The fact that they went from a best of 3 down, like, come on, man. And that's
there's
why it felt rushed. It felt
Mhm.
rushed.
It did, and I've gotten into it with some people at the Discord, and they said, given we knew about this merger with Brazil and all that months and LLA, but they still couldn't figure out this format. And for VCT, you see a completely different like perception, whole different
Well,
yeah.
this has to do with Riot not understanding how to value their own events,
Mm-hmm.
because I said this back when they first announced that there were going to be 3 splits in order to add another international. I was like, by doing this, you were devaluing MSI
Mm-hmm.
completely.
Yep.
You were devaluing Worlds a little bit.
Yep.
And to add a mini international to qualify for another international, which actually doesn't even matter. It's literally one team from each region just playing in a random tournament, which I think is just going to be a single elim, like straight bracket. I didn't even look at the format, but who's actually going to care about that? You can already tell that LCK does not care. They were for funning it. They literally T1 subbed in a player for the entirety of the beginning of the split. They didn't care.
Yeah.
This is not Worlds qualification to them.
They they're taking it easy. I mean, T1's not in it. I'm not saying they're not trying their best. Absolutely.
I think it's pretty arguable they weren't trying their best.
Okay.
Not to say they weren't trying to win,
Mm-hmm.
but when you take your superstar Guma Yusi out of the roster to trial a rookie, and he played great.
Sure.
But you can't argue that this was a decision made to help you win Worlds this year, right? Like to
Right.
promote the best interests of the team short term. It's very long term. They wanted to look at their rookie, which means that they're prioritizing getting on stage experience in a real world environment where the stakes don't matter.
Mm. And that's you because that's the whole thing that I felt when every time I watch LCK. It just didn't feel like they're. It's not the same. It really wasn't
Yeah,
the same.
they were for funning it. Like like I think all the regions were kind of looking at it the same way, right?
Yeah.
Um I think LTA was taking it very serious, but then this whole merger also sets up such a horrible scenario for LTA South. And I made a video about this really briefly, but how can this product last when it looks like all we did was put LTAs into a top and bottom half region where the top half is going to come down and kick the crap out of you every year?
Yeah. It
Like, how are they supposed to either improve or are you going to make LTA North get worse? There's only
Mhm.
two options.
And but from the looks of it, if they don't change something, we're gonna head into a very disastrous result for North America and maybe even
Well,
South America.
I just feel bad because you're literally killing a fan base,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the bigger half of the fan. It's honestly 3/4 of the fan base that you're killing,
Yeah.
not the 25% that make up LTA North fan base. You're killing the bigger LATAM Brazilian fan base
Right.
because why would they care about? It's not even their league.
Right.
They're considered like the second half of a bigger league that is always going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only way that they'll improve is if they regularly play us, not if they play us once a year.
Correct. It has to become like more games too, because like you said, this first split, not only did you take out just about like half of that league, or maybe more, a little less than half, but they have to watch American teams play for the rest of the tournament. It's a
Yeah.
it's frustrating
There's
for
a
everyone.
reason. I mean, there's a reason why this is the lowest watched finals of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
didn't matter. And
Right.
even in LTA North, it felt kind of like a Mickey Mouse final. Like, I don't know. Like, I know there was some hype online around the, 100 Thieves versus TL drama. Like, there was some drama, but it was created by fans. It wasn't even like this is a real final where we expected 100 Thieves to they won for what, 3 weeks?
Yeah. Just about
Like,
3 weekends.
this is a problem with the tri split. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I said even last year, 2 years ago when LEC first did the triple split. I was like, you guys just made it so that the worst teams will win early because they peak very hard, and then that first championship doesn't matter, and nobody cares about domestic championships anymore because you've completely devalued them. There's 3 a year.
Mm-hmm.
You only have to peak for 3 weeks and you win a championship. That's what happened. Is like G2 never won spring because they didn't care. They were
Right.
scaling up for like winter and summer. Or the other way around. They would never won winter. They always won spring, summer.
Right.
Usually by summer. They didn't care about the first two because they
Yeah.
don't matter. Like,
They get to have happy
yeah,
games, a lot of content games, as they call them.
right. But now you're also devaluing history because what does it mean that TL has 5 championships
I don't know.
when you're going to have teams potentially able to win 3 a year? Like, when
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It's
crazy.
people call it similar to the lock-in, which I totally can see, because that does it even go on record? I guess it
Yeah,
officially
you
goes
win
on
lock
record,
in,
but
but I'll tell like no teams value lock in nearly as much as winning stage one, stage two,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's a feeder lead in tournament, like it's almost a content tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cool, it's good to do, but again, they try to mimic the VCT format without actually capturing what makes VCT format good.
Mm-hmm.
Lock in feels like an exciting tournament that then leads you into a bigger
Bigger.
event, which is
Mm-hmm.
Masters.
Right.
And Masters feels big. Like
Mm-hmm.
teams want to win Masters,
Mm.
right? Like it's actually a big deal. But for
First,
the LTA, this just feels like a very watered down version of it, where even like the kickoff wasn't even a tournament. It was more like a mini season that led to a playoffs, which then led to a mini tournament. I don't
it
know. It's very
was
disjointed.
yeah, yeah. That is actually a if good way to capture it. It really just feels like they forced on a format that they thought brought success to VCT.
Yeah.
And now, not only does it matter a little less for the teams that are winning, the teams that lost, they got what, 2 weekends, 2 showings, and then they're
Yeah.
gone.
I mean, you think about like DSG, for example, right? Invested all this money, made it up to tier one. They have played for they played 3 matches,
Just about. They got
3 or
swept the first
4.
weekend, and then they played 3 games the following weekend.
Yeah, and that's it for 2 months of the season, 2.5 months.
Hmm.
They played a total of like 6 games of League of Legends. It's so crazy. You're paying these players how much money? If
Hmm.
I'm Disguised, I'm pissed. I'm like, dude, I'm burning millions on this.
The two
So
teams that I really wanted to see more of, right, was Shopify and Disguise, because both really would have bring them a lot more excitement, get viewers connected.
yeah,
But you see 2 weekends of them, and then you're gonna lose a lot
yeah.
of
That's why I
eyes.
said if you're gonna make 3 international tournaments, we already know the EWC is happening. You don't need to do this first stand
And
event. It just makes no sense. Nobody's gonna care about it. It doesn't mean anything. It's not gonna go into the records as a meaningful event. Just stack EWC sometime between MSI and Worlds. Make that your hyped international third international event, and then run a long season.
right,
Like, just keep the 2 splits. It makes no sense to me, like, why they changed. I get the challenge in making it meaningful is the fact that the LTA merger doesn't operate the same way as VCT
right.
Americas does. Where VCT Americas, they brought the teams here, it actually works really well.
Hmm.
Like, having all the teams in one spot then allows for the LATAM fan base, the Brazilian fan base to still see their teams playing, and it makes them better. Like, they're competing against the
Hmm.
North American teams weekly, and they look good doing it. It's very winnable. Leviathan won the whole thing last year. Whereas I think obviously there's a bigger disparity to start with between LTA North and
So,
Seoul, but that disparity will never narrow
mm, yeah.
because it's like us in Korea.
Hmm.
If we had a tournament once a year against Korea, do you think our region's actually going to significantly improve over years? Like, no. We're just going to get stomped every time, and then we're going to go and be like, okay, well, we got to go to an international.
We got nearly 10 years of data to show that we are not closing that gap. We may have a couple of like wins against, the win against IG. Maybe there
Right.
was a win
But
random, but
when you talk about narrowing the gap, you're talking about the overall quality of play.
Mhm.
Now, imagine if we took our top 3 LCS teams or LTA teams and we put them in Korea for 5 years. I do think they'd be really good.
Yeah.
I do think they would catch up relatively quickly, well, quicker than where they're at now.
Hmm.
They would be very comparable because we've already seen that North American players can go to Korea, hit high challenger and solo queue. It's not a mechanical issue.
Hmm.
It's that
Yeah.
they're not used to playing in a competitive environment that punishes them as hard as they will get punished by the
Hmm.
best teams over there.
And I kind of you bring up a good point, because all these boot camps, the Korean boot camps, they may get like a boost for a little bit, but it's not the consistent competition that they're facing every time, regularly. And so they come back, they adapt back to like whatever NA has to offer, and I don't know.
So yeah, think about the teams that historically boot camp at the beginning of every season. It's like C9, FlyQuest, TL. That's usually it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of course, across the last like 5 years, it's mainly been C9 and
Mm-hmm.
TL, but mostly just C9 actually. Which team, if you look at their win rates, which team tends to do best in spring?
Yeah.
It's always C9.
C9.
C9 is like a 70%, 75% win rate in spring. Like, they're just statistically exponentially better in spring. And then the Korea effect wears off. They start to struggle in summer.
Mm-hmm.
This has happened every single year. So the interesting thing is, I know right after LTA finals, a few teams are actually going to Korea right now
Mm-hmm.
to boot camp. So FlyQuest C9, I
think
believe
DSG
Disguised is
yeah.
there right
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm not sure about Dig. I think Dig is also as well. But they're all in Korea right now at boot camp, so they're gonna come back and play. And this is another gripe. I already tweeted about it today, but the going back to a best of one non-fearless, like, what are we doing?
I don't
What are we
understand that
doing?
decision at all. I was surprised. I couldn't keep up with all the format, but once I heard that Split 2 has best of one, no fearless, I'm like, why?
It's gonna, what's gonna be worse is that we're gonna have to remember how bad it was before. Things are never as bad until you have them like improved, and then you go back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, waking up at 4 sucks, but if you're used to it, you're used to it.
You're used to
And
it.
then you get like a month where you get to wake up at 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go straight back to waking up at 4 and you're like, wait, this is horrible. Like, It's the
Uh,
comparison.
and
That's what it feels like. It's like, bro, we are literally stepping back to something that we knew wasn't good,
mhm.
but we didn't really appreciate how much better like best of threes were, and now we have to go back to it.
I don't know if that's their way of making us miss. I don't even know why. Because Pro says the Fearless was fun. Change up.
Yeah.
They love the best of threes overall. If they had more games, that was the gripe in summer. They thought like they felt like, oh, we only get to play one game and the
Yeah.
whole weekend wasn't enough. I get that.
Well,
Mhm.
I was gonna say variability increases when you do best of ones.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
why we have all these teams that lose to like lower seeded teams, and the
Mhm.
prep is actually worse.
Oh yeah.
When you're talking about the weekly prep, you have to prep for two different teams or four different teams,
Hmm.
like it's horrible. It's actually horrible. So what happens inevitably, and I know this from having worked with a bunch of these teams, they will look at the main team they have to prep for, and
Mm,
the other team they'll do a secondary prep, which is very like, all right, like we kind of know what champs they want to play,
mhm.
but back in the day it was like, oh, it's Golden Guardians, like we can
We
kind of
can
just
we can
play them,
skate through.
you know, yeah, we just beat them with our hands, right?
Mm,
But I do think that in some ways that really drops the competitiveness of the region because you're gonna sort of get these very wild results that don't always fit with the best teams being in the top
mm.
echelon. Um, you're gonna see a lot more. I do feel like you're gonna see a lot less experimentation with
Yeah.
Fearless being removed and a best of one. You're always gonna play the best meta champs that you can in that game.
Hmm.
Why would you ever risk it?
Right. I don't know. I don't get it. It. I wasn't. I was one of those initially didn't really think that Fearless would catch on. It's a fun format. I thought it was just a gimmick, but over this split showed how fun it can be. And I watched like a couple
Yeah,
of different regions, and it really challenges the teams to grow. It really, challenges the staff, the coaching to
yeah.
expand and evolve from just
I
trying the same thing over and over again, right? And
Yeah, I also wanna push back on the idea that it's worse competitively for
mm,
players. I've seen some people make that argument that like, "Oh, well, if you force these players to play champs they're not as great on, we're not gonna see the peak of League of Legends." And it's like, you know what that's gonna do over a long enough time span though, is they're going to have to learn new champions.
mm-hmm,
And long term, the competitive like viability of every player in the region is actually gonna be greater.
yeah,
Right? You're gonna see players who can actually play 10 different champions versus just 4 per season.
mm-hmm,
I think it's ridiculous to say that we want to maintain the the C level that we have now versus dropping to a C minus in the hopes that later on we get to a
can get
B.
beat.
Right? It's
Absolutely.
sort of that initial pain of like if you switch the way you do things, it's going to cause you performance disadvantages
Mm-hmm,
initially. But the idea is that long term it actually improves the environment itself, which
mm-hmm,
is what we want. We want players to be playing to other champions. We want them to think about draft differently, right? I think FlyQuest was the model for that last year.
yeah.
They showed that the best way, and this is something I've been saying for years, the best way to beat teams that are better than you is you play stuff they're not used to and you increase volatility in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You put them in scenarios they haven't trained.
That I think that gives a lot of credit to Whippo because he was not just watching the meta. He'll just play what he thinks is good, counter pick, and how he and the team just catches on it. Before then, I think only Impact was the one that would try something different. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. I mean, that's somewhat true. I think Impact does have a very deep champ pool, and he likes to pull off meta stuff. And everyone's talking about Bwipo because I think Bwipo is the most vocal
Vocal.
about it.
Hmm.
But Quad has had Casio in his pocket. He's had all these picks that he likes to play in competitive. Inspired is actually very open minded when it comes to junglers. He's down to play anything if it makes sense, if it works. He pulls out Nunu. He doesn't care. Like he plays Zyra. He played Morg. He played everything. Um, I think that FlyQuest as a whole is again not just Bwipo wants to be off meta, so we all want to be off meta. It's like they have a coaching staff and an environment in which they're making it okay to experiment
Hmm.
and they're willing to pull it out in practice. There are other teams that used to do some of that, like C9, like Reaper used to cook up some really interesting drafts. But I know C9 also gets a lot more pushback from certain players.
Mm.
So they'll be like, oh no, that's troll though. Like that's troll. We can't do that. Vagar V2 really, really likes off meta picks.
Mm.
Like if he could get them to draft like a Vagar bot because the game is perfect for it. I think he tweeted today about Caps pulling out Anivia. He's like, "This is such a good Anivia angle." Like, that's what we want to see, right? So everyone always that's the thing that's interesting to me. You look at the best teams in the West in history, everyone brings out G2.
Hmm.
What does G2 do besides play fundamentally good League of Legends?
Yeah.
They pull out all sorts of crazy stuff because they know they can do it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Uh,
Like, I think that the model keeps getting shown to people, and then for whatever reason, all these coaching staffs and all these they just were like, "Oh yeah, but that's crazy though. We can't do that. Like we have to play this."
these are some of the issues that many people have brought over and over again with Norfolk Air. They're afraid of criticism or people telling them like, "Oh, this is troll. This sucks. You shouldn't try that." They are very much secretive for the most part. There's a little collaboration between teams, as far as I heard. I mean, in the interview I had with Peter, he was shocked by how little reciprocity there is. And then, earlier this year, Whipple brought up the whole idea: stream scrims with us, and only one team wants to do that. Now, that was a whole separate issue. I'm glad that one worked out. We got one, but I only saw that one. Hope they continue with that. But it's that mentality that we have to protect what we have and not share and not try to
It's
grow.
yeah, it's always seemed like ego to me.
Mm, yeah.
Like you're acting like you have the secret sauce to beat T1 every year. I guarantee you, T1 does not care like that. We're streaming our scrims. I
Mhm.
guarantee you, no Eastern region is watching us to
Right.
learn anything. Like, they are so far beyond what we're trying to do that at this point, any tool that we have to improve the region as a whole, I think has to be taken.
Mm,
And I get that I've had conversations with certain people up higher in certain orgs about this, and they're like, "Well, we don't want to potentially benefit other teams because that costs us our ability to win championships." Like, domestic championships no longer matter. I
mm,
get they matter to sponsors to some level, but like if you're just curb stomping teams in NA and then you go to internationals, you can't make it out of groups every year. How is that good for the region, right, as a whole, in terms of longevity?
yeah. I think
But none of these teams are thinking that long term. It's always like year to year. So I get it.
so.
But
I think that's why we get this whole stale effect that we kind of felt between, I think, 2022 to 2024 ish. Talked to Manny Sanchez about this. Uh, LCS was not in a good place. People find it that things are more or less the same year over year. The other thing I'm thinking about is this is what I encountered when I used to do a lot of NFL stuff. It's a lot of coaches are they don't have job security, and maybe players too. They don't have the job security year to year, and we see that in LCS is notorious for just switching out their roster. Not as bad as EU, but maybe those are the ideas of we got to protect our own and protect our
yeah,
own interests. Uh,
but that's why I
mm,
that's why I said it's an environmental problem. Like, if you don't give someone job security for that year and you tell them that, hey, depending on how we place, you may not have a job next year, you're not going to allow them to be able to experiment
yeah.
with trying things that may or may not do so well,
Mhm.
right? Um, I think if you gave a coach, you have 2 years to get some results, but you can do it however you want, you're going to see very different teams develop.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of orgs want to do that. For whatever reason, they're so stuck on, hey, we need to like improve on what we did last year. And
Mhm.
if how can you even do that when you restructure the whole team?
The
Like,
Immortals.
it's crazy. They had no longevity. They've never had a coach last longer than like 2 years.
Mhm.
And every time, even when they did have a coach last longer, they would shuffle the entire roster on
Roster.
him. So that doesn't work in any professional setting, sports, business,
Mhm.
any of that. Imagine trying to run a company where you have a new staff every year.
Oh
Like,
man.
be
You don't
miserable.
feel the stability. You don't feel like there's any structure. You're living in
Yeah.
anxiety for most part. That
Yeah.
doesn't lend well for creativity or innovation.
Yeah. And you're not incentivized to actually perform at your highest because they think this is the capitalist misconception, I think, that if you're in fear of losing your job, you will perform better. That it's like the exact opposite. You're gonna do the bare minimum
Hmm.
to not get fired and then constantly be looking for what's next.
Hmm.
Like that's kind of what NA has felt like for years.
Right. Right. There's no time to think about what can I get, where can, if I can climb higher or where can I go. It's job security. As long as I do what I'm told, they can't fault me for I'm
Right.
performing my duty, my job.
That's also why when you watch them play, they'll just make certain plays where it's like this is so safe,
Mhm.
but you're not winning games against better regions like that. Like they're just afraid to mess up a lot of
Mhm.
times, or they push too hard and they throw.
Yeah.
Like the amount of games I've seen NA throw against Korean and Chinese teams for absolutely no reason. If they just played them like an NA team, they probably win.
Mm.
But once they get this lead, like C9 did it 2 years ago against LNG at Worlds, they were up like 7K gold and they just run it down mid. And they lose a team fight because they got TP flanked. It was Jax's ear, and they lose the whole game on that. And it was like if it wasn't LNG, if it was literally Evil Geniuses, or if it was TL on the other side of that map, they TL banners on their
Mhm.
names, they would have played that differently. You just took Baron, you would have reset, you would have got your items, you would have controlled the waves and then pushed in together.
Mhm.
Instead, because it's LNG, you take Baron and you go in and try to just hard force to end the game at 50% HP. Like, of course, like it's just it's a mental issue of like I think they're so desperate or afraid that it makes it very hard for them to play even when they get advantages.
And since I think you were with the team back then, right? I know you didn't travel with them,
Yeah,
but you
yeah,
were with.
yeah.
Mhm. Since then, have you seen any changes, any openness to innovation, or at
I
least?
don't work with C9 anymore, so I
Hmm.
don't have a lot of inside information. But and just watching how they're playing, I think this squad is actually pretty good. I do think that they are built to get to an international to worlds. Um, how they're gonna do there remains to be seen because Loki started out really strong. I think the last couple of weeks I watched, like he wasn't doing as much and he wasn't laning as well. Blabber is very dependent on having strong solo laners. So Thanatos has stepped up, which is good. Sven and Vulcan actually look great. So
Yes.
it just remains to be seen. Like, can they do that at an international level though? I don't know.
Mm.
Like, is this team like my projection for this team is that they will be top 3 rest of year,
Hmm.
and then they're gonna go to Worlds. They depending on the group draw, they will maybe squeak out of groups, and then they're gonna get knocked out in the quarterfinals.
You got to remember we don't have a third spot for NA, so top three will they have to
Oh
get
well.
first two place, right? So they either have
Uh,
to bump out TL or FlyQuest, and
I think
they
I mean
might
now
have
it's
the
hard to
upside.
say because
Hmm.
TL obviously just won, so they look really good.
Hmm.
But I think TL has some fundamental weaknesses still. But it's really hard not to say that FlyQuest TL are our top 2.
Hmm.
Right? I
Yeah.
think C9's ceiling is very high, but their volatility is also very high.
Uh,
Like they got destroyed by 100 Thieves.
I would say their first split they came together much faster than I anticipated. I thought this was more like a split two, split three type of team, and but yeah, it might be a good
Well,
start for them.
it's
But
yeah, it's actually that would make sense given a normal timeline for team development and chemistry, but C9 has always been a spring team
true, true.
because I think the Korean boot camp, I think all that, they're always the most hyped at the beginning of the season. They're very much a mentality team.
Mm,
They play really well when they're feeling good, and they will choke sometimes because they're just I don't know, they get into their own head. So
it's
I've seen a lot of volatility out of that squad.
you've seen
But,
this story played out. You've seen this story
oh, yeah.
played over and over.
I talked to Vagar V2
Uh-huh.
a year or two ago about that, and he's like, I brought it up. I was like, "Are you familiar? Are you aware of the whole?" This is something I've noticed. I don't even know if the public really thinks about this, but C9 always wins in springs and they always choke in summer. And he's like, "Really?" And he thought about it. He's like, "I guess yeah, that kind of does happen, but like, why do they fall off in summer when they should be peaking? That's
Mm,
always the question." And it's like that one year, 2023 was the first time they won spring and summer.
yeah, yeah.
They always
It's
choke and
always. Mhm,
they've always choked in summer, and I've never understood it. And then I think it's a lot because one, Korean boot camp helps a lot in spring.
mhm,
Teams are not good in spring generally as a whole, and C9 always outhands them. Right? They've always had really good team
mhm,
fighting and micro and all that. So they generally just beat people by just being better. And then by summer, all the teams kind of even out a little bit, and I think burnout sets in. I think they are a team that
mhm.
suffers a little bit more from burnout than some other teams.
because they would go to MSI as well, right? They have
A lot of
spring
time
during
because
the
they
summer.
win spring every time they go to MSI, and
Hmm.
then burnout would hit.
Yeah.
Like this is a recurring thing I've seen in teams, right? EG did the same thing.
Oh man. And you're telling me that some of the coaches or staff didn't even realize that's a regular.
I don't think it's not that they don't realize. Everyone knows going to MSI is actually really, really bad for your chances of going to Worlds.
Mm,
Like, I think that's pretty commonly accepted. But I don't think they realize the pattern of how commonly it happens to them,
mm,
right? Because if they did, there would be different ways of approaching how you structure your practice environment, your schedule, all that. That's something that we talked a lot about when I was on the performance staff with EG. It just obviously it wasn't able to be implemented because they lasted one more year.
yeah. Yes. Uh, but you know that those factors have to be taken into account, and for these are young kids, mind you.
Mhm.
They want to do well, and they think that they will keep up that same level of performance throughout the year. It's only recently that I noticed that some of them actually talk about needing to take more time to recover and being able to be mindful of that. And I think that
Mhm.
really helped. Was it TL? TL looked great last year. They went to multiple international events and still look really good.
I bet they were very burnt out though.
That's
By the time they got to Worlds,
yeah,
they were playing more solo queue than any other team
yeah.
by easily 30% or more.
Mm,
They were playing like 14 hours a day.
damn.
Yeah. Like
Oh,
TL last year was trying to play like a Korean team.
mm-hmm,
That was the mentality that they had. And it's so hard to keep that up, right? Like
mm-hmm.
so I definitely think that they came into this season a little bit different. They're trying to go a little more comfortable pace and they've been ramping up and it's been good. But uh yeah, I don't think most players here can sustain that, especially given the fact that playing 14 hours of solo queue in North America is so much more mentally taxing than playing 14 hours of solo queue in Korea.
I
It's
bet.
just different
I bet.
because it's miserable
Uh
here.
huh.
Like from the top down,
Uh huh.
it's miserable here compared to playing in Korea. I played in Korea for a week, and it was like even in low elo, I was in like silver.
Mm-hmm.
The game just felt like they were more fun and exciting because you're just fist fighting. You just play the
Mm.
game, you're done in 15 minutes, you move on, go to the
Oh
next.
wow.
And immediate queue times
Mm-hmm.
every time. It's like you queue up, it was 10-second queues. And
Seriously?
so
Wow.
14 hours, you could just power through like 20
Mm.
games. And in that time, you're less tilted actually. What really tilts people is the fact that they just wasted 40 minutes of their lives in an unwinnable game.
Yep.
In Korea, that does not happen.
Wow.
You guys lose a 5-man like team fight at second drag, they FF. They just sell all their
They
items and they
just
FF
FF. Wow. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're like, what's the point of playing this out?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The game shouldn't be at this state.
Mm.
So that's why Korean teams actually do so well because they like have gone through like think about when you triple the number of games played, the iterations of situations you've seen triples as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so little fundamental things like how many Baron fights do you think you fought this year?
Ooh, that's a good
You know?
question.
They
Right.
fought 3
Mm-hmm.
times as many. So their practice per hour is
Mm-hmm.
infinitely more efficient and better practice than what we're doing here. So when we ream on NA players because they don't want to play 8 hours of solo queue, do you realize in 8 hours of solo queue, they probably play 5 games?
Yep.
And out of those 5 games, they're going to get griefed in 2. And then one of them, they're going to get an ADC that's like a one trick Draven.
Mm-hmm.
It's not practice.
No.
Like,
No.
yeah, it's mentally exhausting for them. So
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
understand we want to talk about work ethic, but there's no way for them to practice
Yeah,
efficiently.
I was about to bring that up because you had get that experience to play solo queue in Korea, and so qualitatively it's different. And you're bringing up this whole point. There is no drilling system in League. Maybe the practice tools
Well,
has allowed for that,
there is sort of now, but
sort of now,
not
but
too many
not.
people are using it. It's also hard to use because
Mm,
you have to get 2 teams willing to jump into the server together. You have to, like, set it all up. It's not the easiest thing.
right.
I think it will get used more as coaching staffs figure it out, but the problem is it came out so late, there's not a lot of staff. And this is another bigger problem that I see in tier 1 orgs now. I made a tweet about this too, is there's no ancillary staff on most of these orgs now.
Mm,
Very, very few.
they're working bare
FlyQuest
bones. Hmm.
FlyQuest had a performance director that apparently didn't go to Brazil with them because of another issue. Not their fault, but like
Right.
he had an injury or something. So
Hmm.
he didn't go to Brazil with them, and they look like a different team in Brazil. You know, there's all these things, and people want to say that, I kind of got into a little bit of a debate about sleep and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, everyone's like, oh, this should be like common sense. Nothing is common sense for these kids.
Yep.
You cannot assume that anyone knows how to do anything.
Hmm.
And I say kids, not just as the players, the coaching staff, a lot of the management, these are young people who oftentimes don't have a ton of experience in either running a corporation or in running a competitive performance team.
Mm,
So that's one of the biggest things I've seen change over the last few years, or the last 2 years, is obviously I'm not working with any teams right now, and I'm not just trying to advocate for my own job in this, but uh, there is such a drop off in how players are taken care of now
mm,
that you're going to see it translate into other stuff
I bet.
like sleep schedules,
Sleep,
diet.
nutrition,
Yeah,
yeah,
none of that stuff is going to
workout.
get managed
Hmm.
anymore. It's going to go straight back to grassroots esports days where players are just told to practice and play, and then hey, you should eat well and you should exercise.
Right.
But I promise you, none of them are going to be able to do that on their own. It's just not going to happen.
These are young 20s, and they've already started much earlier too. So their life is revolved around being successful at this esports. But life skills, taking care of your mental, taking care of your
Yeah,
physical health, it's important. It's part of the well-being and the ability to get through this yearly grind. Um,
yeah,
Absolutely. So it's also sad to hear that a lot of teams have to make those tough decisions to let go of staff and personnel. Um,
yeah, yeah. I just think that obviously it's a funding issue, which
mhm,
is understandable, but there has to be some level of, I guess, I don't know, meeting in the middle on it, right? I've worked with a few players either remotely or like even in person a couple times just on my own, outside of just direct org communications. Like they've reached out individually, and I've helped them out with stuff. But like, I think if more teams were at least receptive to like doing stuff like that again for significantly less budget, there's definitely a way to do it.
mhm.
But I think teams have pulled back so far now. They're like, well, we can't afford anything that isn't just like
Mhm,
what we absolutely have to pay for. And so I think that's the bigger problem is like there's still, I mean, teams are getting more sustainable, but it's not because they're generating more revenue.
mhm. It's
They've
just
cut their overhead,
yeah.
which is only the first part of the problem. Like I still don't think esports as a whole has really figured out how to generate revenue yet, which is partially a Riot issue, but it's also mainly a team issue. Like these teams need to figure out how do they sell something? How do they get money into their bank account, you know?
Yes. Yes. And they have to figure it out fast because as time goes by, it's only gonna get harder and
Yeah.
harder.
Well, I mean, like even the Saudi stuff, like the Saudi investment's actually not that much. People meme about how much money it is,
Hmm.
and when you factor in the cost, the overhead, all that, it's actually not that much money.
It's good.
That's the crazy thing. They're doing like people don't. I think people don't realize how desperate the orgs are right now, like to be funding these rosters.
Hmm.
To talk a little bit about my own experience with NACL this season, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm building an OQ team. I'm paying for
Yeah.
them out of pocket. I just found out, like recently with the rulebook being released, that the NACL prize pool got cut by over 60%.
Are you serious? Damn.
So if you cut the prize pool by 60%, why are players going to be paid what they used to get paid? They're going to
Hmm.
get paid 60% less.
Less. Mhm.
It's not worth it to pay for a team that costs $20,000 if the prize pool is $7,000.
Oh my god.
That's a bad investment, you know?
Yes.
It made sense if you were going to do it and you could potentially win $20,000.
Mhm.
Fine. I'm happy to break even.
Right.
But why would I invest that kind of money to go negative, like 200%, 280%?
Hmm.
It's insane.
And this is for a chance to just win.
Yeah,
Seven.
if you win, if you
Oh,
get fourth, I think you get like $1,500.
oh Lord. You're gonna put through a whole year of, well, how about
It's
it's by
it's
the whole
it's
year? Or
literally it's not even a prize pool.
no.
Essentially, what they're saying is that these players are worth about $200 a month if you
If
wanted
even.
to sort of get close to even.
Hmm. If even
It's
200.
actually unreal. And you know what drives me crazy is they're investing apparently, I don't know for sure, but this is the rumor, like it's like $2 million per LTA org as a subsidy, right?
Mm.
So they can afford to pay their regular players the bare minimum of whatever. Like California minimum wage, they're getting paid. I think Player Association negotiate at least 75,000 each per year. So the player minimum salary for LTA is like 75K.
Okay.
Some of these players are getting paid way more than that. They're getting
Mhm.
paid like 500, 400K per year because they're superstars. Whatever.
Mhm.
I don't think that should exist. I think I think salary caps need to be implemented, and there needs to be redistribution of money down to tier two.
Mhm.
In order for tier three to survive, there has to be a reason to make it to tier two.
Right. And
In
even
order
for
for tier one to survive, tier two has to be sustainable.
and that's been the issue, right? Your these tier 2, tier 3s, they don't have that incentive because their path to tier 1 is still unclear after all
Yeah.
these years.
And I guarantee you, all the players in tier one that are playing right now for like 400,000, $300,000 will still play the game for $100,000 if that's the only option.
Mm,
What are they going to do? Start streaming? Well, they should already be
they
streaming.
should.
So I get that it feels like a communist move of like, oh, let's take money from the rich and give it to the poor, but like you're literally destroying your own ecosystem by making tier two utterly unsustainable. No org besides like people like me who are stupid, who want to throw money at this, are going to jump into this long
Mm,
term. I'm not even thinking about long term now.
right. You just-
Right. I think I want to try to get through this season. We're going to see what we can do. If we can find partnerships, great. But there's absolutely no way, if this is the model that it's going to be, I'm going to do this again next year.
right.
It's just a waste of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels really bad because
Mhm.
I thought, last year when I made the decision to even do this, I was like, well, if we make NACL, if we qualify, there's a prize pool. There was like $6,000 last year to qualify.
Mm.
And then if we win NACL, let's say top four in NACL, then we actually make our money back. It's like 20K. It's like
Yeah.
10 to 20K.
Yeah.
I was like, that actually sounds reasonable. I don't
Mhm.
care if I make money on this. I'm not getting
Right.
into esports to make money. That's stupid.
Mhm.
But if I can at least get like 80% of my initial investment back, I think it's totally worth it. But if I'm going to go in there and basically burn my money and get 10% of it back,
Yeah.
that's a horrible investment. Like,
That it's like you're going in there, even if you win, your ROI is really not that great.
It's
So,
it's it's basically there is no ROI period because I can't even say that, oh, at least I got a lot of viewership out of it.
mhm.
Like if you look at the viewership numbers on NECL, you're talking like what, few thousand
It's
per
a few
stream,
thousands, yeah.
maybe few hundred sometimes.
Mhm.
They need to learn to budget 100K. That's what I'm saying. A pro player reasonably should be able to live on less than $200,000 a year. If
Mm.
you're getting paid 150 to $200,000 a year to play video games, you should be pretty comfortable. That is more money than I make. Like being a
Absolutely.
doctor,
Right?
like I have a doctorate. Like that's
Uh,
not bad.
mhm.
Uh, and you should also be, doing content. You should be making money on the side. You should be doing other stuff. You can coach. You can do all these things,
Mhm.
right? And it should be org affiliated so that orgs also generate revenue off their
Right.
players.
Mhm.
Like there's a way to make the model very sustainable, or more sustainable than it
Mhm.
is. But what Riot has now done is they've created a system where they're so used to being front loaded with money, right? You got
Mhm.
players getting signed for $5 million less than 5 years ago.
Yeah, I
That
remember
was
those
perks.
times. Yeah,
Like that's unreal. $5 million for one player. You could have funded the entire tier two scene for 5 years.
but they weren't thinking that.
So that's what I'm saying is like Riot clearly has $10 million a year, at least $15 million to pay all these LTA teams the subsidy that they get. If they were to cut that by 25% and redistribute that money downward to
Into
tier
tier
two,
2. Mhm.
you would make tier two completely sustainable.
Mhm.
These players could still come in getting paid similar to what they're getting paid now, which is somewhere around 1,000 to 2,000 a month, which is enough to sort of live on if they live together, they make it
Depending, yeah,
work.
you have to have the
No,
roommates. Yeah.
or a lot of them because they're playing remotely. Who cares about in person? Play
Right.
remote. That's enough for a lot of these players who are living in cheaper states to actually afford their rent.
Mhm.
They might have to work a part-time job, but hey, now they can live that lifestyle of being a pro and they're not completely broke.
Mhm.
I think then you create a system where a lot of these kids, maybe who aren't going to college, they don't have much going for them. they could at least look at that as an option. If I'm really good at League of Legends. If I grind, I can make 1,000 extra a month and play in tier 2 with a shot to go tier 1. That sounds pretty good.
Right.
Like nobody should be getting into this to get rich at this point.
No. Just want to. It's that I love League of Legends. I want to be a
If
pro.
you it yeah, if you wanna play League of Legends for a living,
Yeah.
this is a it should be a way to do it. It should
Mhm.
not be, "I wanna be, like, as rich as freaking LeBron James
You're
playing
not
League
gonna
of
get
Legends."
faker money. You're not gonna.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I
Ugh.
that's how I see it. Like, there
Yeah.
needs to be a reassessment of what esports really is, not as we are pro sports, but rather we are a league that allows people to play professionally and to
Mhm.
make a living doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. They have to be honest too with the players
Yeah.
of what their chances are and how to help them succeed, not just be playing in getting into tier one, but all the other factors. But they're not. There's no investment. There's no coaching on that. Um,
Well, that's something that I've been pushing a lot with my players
mhm.
is I've really, really driven them to do more content. All of them, most of them are streamers now, like at some level, like Shochi, Sushi,
Shochi.
they all stream.
Hmm.
They stream very regularly. Chad streams pretty regularly. Mixer does occasionally.
Hmm.
Mixer's super busy though because he's in college too. So I get Chad and Mixer don't have as much time. They're in school.
Right.
Mixer also plays on a CLOL team, so he's literally in school full time and scrimming with two teams. So it's a lot. He's
That
not
is a
sleep
lot.
he needs to sleep more.
Yeah.
But, like, some of the other kids, like, Shochi's really taken to it. I got him involved in the, league creator group.
Mm.
He's
Yeah.
been really trying to be active on posting TikToks, like, streaming more, like, networking with other streamers. I'm like, "This is what you have to do.
Hmm.
Even if you don't make it to tier 1, you're building a possibility of having a sustainable income on your own. Like,
Hmm.
have a career on the side, right?"
Yes.
And it also helps you because if an org is looking between Shochi and another mid laner, and if they're comparable in skill, but Shochi also comes with having a couple thousand viewers,
Hmm.
hey, that's way more valuable to my org. I'm more
Yes.
likely to sign that player.
Absolutely.
So it just benefits them. Like
Absolutely.
I've been really trying to guide these kids the right way to like this is how you should approach looking at getting into tier 1.
Mm. Yeah, I've had some interaction with Sochi, and I've seen him being active. So good on you to kind of push these kids to think broader, not just on the game. Uh, in that segue, though, let's talk about some of your process of putting this team together, and
Mhm.
you're also guiding them a little differently than what most orgs do with players. So walk us through, like how did you
It was
bring
a
them together?
It was the process. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts about how to identify skill in players and all that. I'm not a high level player myself, or an analyst or a coach.
Hmm.
I look at human personality traits. I do think I'm pretty good at reading people,
Mm.
and so that's something that I felt like I wanted to be at the forefront of my decision making when I was signing players. I worked really closely with Sherv, my co-founder, and the first thing we looked at was coach. I
Mm.
was like, my biggest priority in building this team is finding the right coach. So I've worked with Tails before on C9 Academy. I already thought very highly of him. We did interviews. I interviewed a few different coaches. um, after talking to Tails, like this is my guy. I think he is going to be the right person to develop a team and take them through a very short developmental process and get them to peak condition within a short amount of time.
Mm.
That's the problem with OQs. You need your team to peak. You can't do a developmental
Right.
roster.
Right.
Uh, so the problem is Tails is going to be leaving us after OQ, which we already knew.
Hmm.
He's committed to coaching at Winthrop. So I was like, it's fine. Like I will find a coach. I still need to look for a coach actually. um, but
Hmm.
we knew this was going to happen. It was established beforehand. Once we found the coach, then we had our combine in which we brought in 25 of the best possible players we could find in NA. And luckily, I was able to leverage a bit of my brand and the fact that a lot of people know who I am, and a lot of people in tier 1 know who I am. I was able to put together a really good combine. We had all these mix and match groups. We had drills. At the end of it, we picked 10 players that we thought were really strong and had a best of 3 or best of 5
Hmm.
that was casted. It actually went to 5 games. It was a banger. It was really,
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
So I try to make it like sort of a professional feeling, like what
Mm.
scouting grounds used to be.
You're right. Yeah.
That's what I just ran my own scouting grounds. Uh, and then we did a lot of interviews. And I will
Hmm.
tell you, like at one point, the plan was to sign 10 players.
Mm.
We decided these players are so good. Why don't we just try to negotiate and sign two sister teams?
Right.
That way we could run what I really wanted to do, which was they could scrim each other way more frequently and better scrim quality, and
Mm,
also run situational drafts that we were pre-selecting for both sides. Hey, we want to see the Vi Nocturne matchup. We want to see you on Azir. We want to see we could create our own scouted matchups to get
mhm,
both teams more ready for OQ. That kind of fell through, but obviously because there's so many ongoing
yeah.
negotiations, we dealt with a couple players that we wanted, kind of switching last second. It was just
Mm,
very convoluted. We eventually kind of went with a hybrid of we knew for sure we wanted to build around Sushi Mixture. That bot lane had played together before. They were very solid. They're some of the best bot lane duos we saw. We saw very, very high ceiling. And then we went with standardized team. Well, we went with a team chemistry or team building concept of pairing veterans with rookies.
mm,
So we knew that if our main high powered, high ceiling rookie core was going to be in our bot lane, we had to have a very stable top jungle. So we went with two veterans in Lawrence and Chad.
mhm,
Chad is a very vocal leader. That's something we really liked, and he's also a very strong mentality leader. So during the best of five, he was down 0-2. They reverse swept. His team reverse
oh,
swept.
nice.
And we saw that in team chat and team comms. We had coaches and our staff listening on both comms.
Mhm,
He was a very he was a very vocal leader and instrumental in getting all the younger rookies to take themselves out of that mentality of like, hey, we're losing, we're 0-2, to let's get back and win this. Take it one game at a time. They actually made that happen. So um, we felt that by pairing him with Lawrence, we don't have to worry about our top side
mm,
losing too hard or anything like that. They're going to be very, very stable. We're going to know what we get every game. And then Shochi is just came back from a Korean boot camp himself. Mechanics were really, really strong, very good champ pool. And in talking to Shochi, I just liked his mentality. He wants to improve at all costs.
mm,
I think he's been one of the most coachable and receptive players I've ever seen or worked with. And he's got a very, very high ceiling. So felt really good about bringing him in. And so we have as a very high ceiling core of like, these young, hungry rookies in Shochi, Sushi, and Mixture. And then Chad and Lawrence are just very stable. They've won OQ before, they've done this
yes.
before.
Yeah.
So it just felt like a really solid team. And then with Tails coaching, it's been phenomenal. He's obviously got tier two experience with
Mhm.
C9 Academy, winning a lot of C9 Academy splits. So yeah, I thought the team itself looked really good on paper and they've been doing really well. So I'm really excited to see everyone watch them play.
Absolutely. And hearing that, you put a lot of thoughts and a lot of details in every pieces that put together is with an intention and with a plan in place. And that is more than I can ask from any team that just want to put the best players together and think that
Yeah.
they can
A
win.
a lot of these rosters we've looked at, we're like, they look good on paper, right? A lot of
Uh-huh.
these players are
Right.
very, very good players.
Hmm.
I don't know how they're going to do as a team. And this is something that I criticize tier one orgs for a lot of
Yeah.
times. I will tell you, like I said, like to C9, do not. I don't know if Perks is a good signing, and I love Perks, as
Hmm.
a player.
As a
I just
player,
don't think
right?
he fit that team. Like
Hmm.
same thing when they wanted to bring in Jensen back out of retirement. I was like, I think Jensen's good. I think you know exactly what you're gonna get out of him. That's what I told them. I was like, you know exactly what you're gonna get out of him, which is you'll probably win a domestic title. You're gonna go to international, and you're not gonna get past quarters.
Yep.
You need a higher ceiling than what you're about to get. And this is the same criticism I've had for a lot of teams. Like you guys are constructing rosters that fundamentally don't make sense. That's why in terms of Valorant, I love G2's roster,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
When I looked at rosters like what Leviathan had built last year, I was like, they have so much firepower, but I don't know how it's going to work because Ospas is like just not that type of player to just plug into a team that wants to like play around other people.
Hmm.
He needs to, like on MIBR,
Yeah.
he built that team to play for him,
Okay, that's what it
and
happened.
they look good.
Yes. That's a team that did not win a single thing last
They
year.
didn't win a map the last 3 years.
Oh,
Like,
3 years. Holy
yeah, they've always been the worst team in the league, but like they put Ospas in. Oh, now they're winning. Why? Because he handpicked that roster to play for him.
shit.
They will do whatever it takes to get him into positions that he needs, and he will frag out. Like it's good. I don't think
Yes.
that's a bad way to build a roster.
Sure.
But you have to know what you're doing with intention. Like you said, there has to be a theme to it. I think what NRG is struggling with now is they have no freaking clue what to do with their roster.
Yep.
I think C9 is really struggling with what to do with their roster. They have
telling
a
you.
phenomenal talent in Oxy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Zeppa is very
Zippers.
stable.
Mm-hmm.
The last time that roster looked good was before Oxy was on it,
Oh gosh,
which is crazy.
that
But
is
they had
crazy.
Leaf, they had Zelsis, they
No
had
way.
2 rookies in Rooney and Jake. That roster was literally a top 2 roster regular season, with 2 rookies who nobody thought were good. Like, if you put Jakey and Rooney on paper,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be like, these guys shouldn't even be in tier 1 maybe, but they were top 2 in the league because they fit the team. The team worked so well together, right? You wouldn't take these players individually against Ospas or against, like, like Zekin or anything like
Right.
that, but they fit the chemistry of what the intention of that roster was, and they could play. And then you had Leaf fragging.
Yeah.
Like, that guy's a talent. So I just think that in esports, there's not enough thought put towards personality types
Mm-hmm.
and player types. It goes beyond just like how they play.
I'm just surprised to hear that because this is nothing new. Because if you look at T Sports, sometimes you'll see teams that are punching up their weight because not because they have the
Mhm.
best talent, but because
Yep.
team chemistry and the sum is better than its parts.
I mean, the Spurs and the Patriots are the 2 best examples in traditional sports of how to build an environment that players buy into, and then you get results that supersede what you would have assumed, right?
Absolutely.
And some of the superstar rosters, like the Lakers and all that, have been a case example of why you can't shove 3 really good players together
Yeah.
and just expect to win.
They may have like peaks of successes, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
This is why I like what Golden State used to have done. I don't know about now. I haven't watched it.
Yeah. I mean, well, Golden State was actually the rare mix of where they had both.
Yeah.
They had 3 supremely talented players that were on a roster that fit really well too. Like, and then you had like Patrick Beverly, like all these people like just playing defense for them, and right, and you had the ball, Splash Brothers, and then like
Yes.
and then what's his name, Green. Like, it was just
Draymond.
Draymond Green.
Yeah,
I mean,
Draymond.
yeah, it was just crazy like how well constructed that roster was, and they just happened to find a generational talent in Steph Curry. Like, that's
Yes.
that's sometimes what it is,
You
right?
just land that one and then you build around. Look,
Yeah.
Jordan, you've really taken to lesson to watch. You got to watch. I mean, there was like you weren't part of like the performance aspect, but you were there to watch the teams, and now you're taking the lesson and building your own team. I am wishing you guys success. We are all playing this week.
Thank you. Yeah, this Saturday is the beginning of OQ, so they'll play hopefully the next 3 weekends, assuming they keep making it on, and then hopefully we make it in NACL, and then we'll be playing on the main stage, but on weekdays apparently.
Absolutely. We're looking forward
Yeah.
to that. Are you streaming? Are the players streaming? How's
Yeah. I hope I applied for co-stream rights, which I should get being a team owner. I told all the players to apply as well, so they can also stream their own views, their own POVs. So yeah, if you guys want to check them out, it's all linked on our Twitter page. I have all their socials linked as well, so that fans and all that can find them and watch the next up and coming NA talent. Hopefully,
tune in, folks? These are some amazing players and people that are put together, and root for them. Root for everyone who is trying to find success in this game that we all love. For whatever reason, we keep coming back to this game. Even though I tried to quit several times. I don't know about you, man.
that's why I do this actually, so I don't have to play it.
You get to
I can
watch.
just make I can make content around League without actually playing it. It's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Folks, thank
Yeah.
you so much. And thank you so much for your time, Doc. And for anyone who wants to get connected with you, can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm most active on Twitter at doc_respawn, but I stream on Twitch. Obviously, I'm streaming right now, just
Mhm.
Doc Respawn. I'm trying to get more active on TikTok, stuff like that. So, any of my socials, it's just Doc Respawn. But I appreciate you having me on. It's always good to talk esports.
Absolutely. We'll have you on back. Maybe talk a little bit about what we see in First Stand, what we see in VCT. It's
Yeah.
great to have you
Okay.
on.
Well, let's real quick, so we have a reason to talk again sooner. Let's make predictions. So,
Sure.
who do you think wins Bangkok?
Man, it's hard not to pick EDG. I
It,
mean,
that is the most obvious
that is
answer.
the
Yeah.
most obvious answer.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's put it this way. Let's predict the semis.
Oh.
So EDG probably wins, right?
Mhm.
Because we're both saying that EDG probably wins the whole event.
Mhm.
Vitality G2. Who do you got?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to lean by G2. I like
Okay.
Vitality where Vitality's at. I don't think they have that same
Okay. This is actually more boring
sponsor.
because I agree with you. But okay, let's put it. Do you think do you think G2 will have a close series, like within 3 rounds per map, or do you think it's going to be kind of a blowout?
Uh, this one I actually think it might be closer. It's not going to be a
Okay.
stomp like they did against TL. What I will say, the losers still have to play each other, right? T1 if they lose against EDG, which we will assume,
Yes, it is a
and
lower
then
bracket run
Vitality.
still.
So T1 Vitality in the losers bracket. That one is interesting to me. I don't know where I lean on that one.
So, okay, who do you think the final is going to be? EDG versus who?
I'm scared of T1. That's the thing. I as much as
You
confident I am on G2.
you absolutely should be because I watched their playoffs games against DRX and Gen G. That team mechanically is terrifying.
Mm.
They are terrifying. I think T1 legitimately might be able to beat EDG tomorrow.
Ooh,
Or not tomorrow, but whatever day it is,
right.
like
The
on
upcoming.
Thursday, I think.
Mhm.
I would not be completely surprised if T1 beats EDG if they're shooting like if they play to their normal level because they are hyper disciplined and they have some absolute shooters. Itsu is a monster. That dude can shoot as well as Kankan. Like it's actually it's very scary. It's a very different style,
Mhm.
but their ability to like place crosshairs exactly where people come out of every single time is it's unreal. I've never seen it before.
Wow.
Watching a whole bunch of tier 1 Valorant in NA, you see a very fluid play style, a lot of gunfighting, all that stuff. The way that Korea plays, it's almost preset.
Ooh,
They have their crosshairs all aimed and everyone just walks into them. It's crazy. It's a very, very different shooting style.
damn.
But it's very scary.
Mhm.
Like I think what we saw with with some of the other teams too, it's like you'll see it. I mean, DRX, I'm actually surprised lost as bad as they did,
Mhm.
but T1 is legitimately very, very scary when they're shooting well. Like their aim is crazy. They have some of the best mechanics I've seen in the game.
I think this is worth waking up to watch just to watch that first one. It might just
Like
be
I said, I'm
T1
so hyped.
EDG for
Yeah, so
this one.
I'm gonna say I'd love for G2 to go on. I'm a big fan of obviously VCT Americas. I would love to see G2 do well and hopefully win
Mhm.
Masters. But I'm predicting it's gonna be T1 EDG.
Oh, okay. I'll go G2
Yeah.
EDG
Okay.
and
All right.
with a G2 forcing a 5 map 5 map right? Is best of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
forcing a fifth map.
I think G2 will beat Vitality. I'm gonna say 3-1.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of faith in EU teams. I just don't. Like they're if you watch see that when you watch them, if you watch a lot of EMEA, I haven't watched a ton, but the matches you watch mechanically are not as good.
Yeah.
Like they're big believers in the double tap to the chest. I don't like like
They just
they love
what
vandal tapping people in the chest.
they're
I don't get
body
it.
merchants. Body merchants.
Yeah.
It's true. I've watched a bit of EMA last year, so not as much this year, but the quality is
They're just
different.
not as clean.
There's not.
Yeah. All
Awesome.
right, cool. Good talking to you.
All
I'll
right.
talk to you soon.
Good talk. All right. Have a good night.
All right, bye.